So when you think about the years between 1971 and 1997, could you tell us about your role in the Kansas City, Missouri School District as a student?
Um, my role in the Kansas City School District during 71 to 1971, 1997, I started as a fourth grader at Pinkerton, which that year it became DM Pinkerton Latin Grammar. We went to uniform. I remember the uniform: blue pants, white collared shirt, navy blue tie, red sweater. I remember it. And I did DM Pinkerton fourth grade and fifth grade. And then I went on to Lincoln College Preparatory Academy as a sixth grader in 1989 and did all middle school and all high school in that one building from 1989 until June 3rd, 1996.
Okay. So what did you think about wearing those uniforms? Had you always wore a uniform to school, or was that a big change?
Fortunately for me, prior to me attending Pinkerton or DM Pinkerton, I spent 3 years at St. Martin de Porres, which was a Catholic school right on Swell Parkway. So I had had some experience with uniforms, but naturally as a 9-year-old fourth grader, it was not something I would have chose to do. I would have much rather been in my regular school clothes, but again, coming from a Catholic private school, I was used to wearing uniforms. The tie was definitely an added touch. I didn't really care much for wearing a tie, but I don't know too many 9-year-olds that would. And we had to wear that tie every day. Navy blue, it was a clip-on tie, and you had to have your red sweater on and your button-up shirt and your blue slacks. So no, I didn't care much for wearing the uniforms. And when I left elementary and went on to Lincoln, and we didn't have to wear uniforms, it was probably the greatest feeling ever, as a sixth grader, of course. But I much preferred not being in uniform as opposed to being in uniform. From what I remember, it was very, I don't want to say rigid, but everything sort of had its place. And I think that stemmed from the principal we had at the time. I mean, she even dictated how we said her name. At the time, her name was Marie Grant, who was an excellent principal. But when,
I remember Marie Grant.
yes, and so when you said Miss Grant, you better pronounce that T on the end of her name, Mrs. Grant. And every student in the building did that. What I remember about Pinkerton and the curriculum and kind of the atmosphere, I mean, we had a good time. We had really good teachers. But I do feel like we were being challenged. It didn't feel like just a regular high school. It didn't feel like any elementary school I had attended prior to that. It definitely seemed more focused, a little bit more advanced. It's where I first learned to play the violin, and we didn't just play around on the violin. We played the violin. We played, by the time I left as a fifth grader, we were playing definitely some more difficult music. The Latin classes were definitely more advanced. Teachers pushed us. I remember participating in various competitions, math competitions. My fourth grade teacher, Miss Mildred Kason, put me in a math competition and put into my mind that you should be an engineer. And so from 9 years old until I got my undergraduate degree, it's in engineering. And I think she played a big part in that. So they definitely worked us and prepared us to be.
And I remember Miss Kason.
She is the one that set me on the path towards math. She put me in that math competition, and you need to be an engineer. Math is your thing. And so from the fourth grade
So
on.
what was the school like? Was it integrated?
No, it was predominantly African American, or at least the 2 years that I was there. It really hadn't started to integrate as of yet, so I don't know what happened after I left, but it was primarily African American. So I was there at the beginning. I was there at the beginning when the Latin grammar theme was implemented at Pinkerton, 1987, I believe. It was my fourth grade year.
Wow.
One of the benefits of Latin was I mean, obviously, it's not a language that is spoken anymore. It's primarily used in the medical field. So just that exposure to something different, learning about Greek mythology and learning about where words actually came from. I was able to translate those 2 years in Latin at elementary into middle school and high school. My sixth grade year at Lincoln, we do a foreign language exploration. So you take 9 weeks of Latin and French and Spanish and German, and then you kind of picked your language as a seventh grader. So naturally, as a seventh grader, I went back to Latin. And I took Latin 7 through 10th grade, I believe. So I had gotten up to Latin 4 or 5, which is advanced Latin. Taking Latin now, when you get to ACTs, GREs, taking Latin definitely trains your mind to look at words differently. Word associations, if you're not quite sure of a word, if you can kind of break it down into its parts, you can probably figure out what it means or how it relates. The efforts put into integrating the district, as I remember, I didn't see much of it or pay attention to much of it as an elementary student. However, when I got to Lincoln Prep, I noticed that I had made friends with people who were being bussed in. One person in particular, she took a taxi cab from Odessa, Missouri. I mean, every day. And Odessa, now again, as a teenager, I don't know if I paid attention to where exactly Odessa was, but thinking about it now, she was 40 minutes to class, 40 minutes home every day in a taxi cab. There were several students that were like that were bussed in from outside of the community into the school. Probably more than anything, I had friends that attended the other magnet schools. And so I had heard about students that were bussed in from all over the district. Like, for example, at Central, they had fencing and wrestling and diving. And so kids were bussed in from Lee Summit and all the surrounding suburbs to come in and participate specifically in that program. So I had some friends that were outside the community who were bussed in or had taxi cabs that brought them to and from every day. That is probably the biggest thing that I saw to integrate. And then just the magnet themes in itself. Definitely trying to appeal to a wide range of people. If you wanted a college prep curriculum, you came to Lincoln. Classical Greek and computers, you went to Central. I think agriculture or something like that was at East. Military and law was at Northeast. So they definitely had the different themes at all 9 of the high schools.
Good memory of those things.
Oh yeah, I definitely remember. I could probably run through all of them. Paseo being a performing arts, and Southeast I think was medical. Westport was communications. Southwest, science. They built the botany center, the aquarium. Yeah. So yes, I remember it all very vividly. Because I remember, you could pick whatever school you wanted to go to and they would provide the transportation. So to answer your question, the biggest thing is probably the various themes and then providing the transportation all over Kansas City from wherever. As a teenager, I think the community responded favorably. Again, I don't know that I really watched the news or paid attention much, so I don't remember any uproars or community battles or fights or anything like that. So to me, I was at the best high school in the state, so I was told. So everything seemed okay to me. The staff's attitudes towards integration, I thought, again, appeared to be favorable. I think at Lincoln, the staff there, they gave us the best that they had daily, every day. I don't feel like we were mistreated or looked at any differently. I don't recall teachers going out of their way to voice their opinions about integration. I felt like while I was at Lincoln, they definitely were going to prepare us for college. The staff was very integrated, maybe 50-50 as far as minority, non-minority. I'm not sure what it is now, but I would at least say 50-50. There was definitely more of a minority presence then. My sixth grade year, the student population was heavily minority. I would venture to say somewhere between 75-80%. However, by the time I graduated 7 years later, it was probably closer to a 60-40. And I may be a little off on those percentages. I didn't look them up, but it was definitely more diverse. Yes, ma'am. The attitudes of the students, again, we embraced each other. It wasn't very many of us. Now, I will say this. I did all 7 years at the high school building, and then my ninth grade year, they started to put the middle schoolers back across the street at the middle building. So for my particular class, we had been together since sixth grade. And so by the time we graduated, we were all friends. There were different pockets of groups, but there was no division or animosity or anything like that. There was Lincoln Middle, and then I guess there was Lincoln Prep Middle. So Lincoln Middle was still open, but I was a part of Lincoln Prep Middle.
Lincoln Middle was considered the traditional school.
Traditional school. And so my ninth grade year, they started moving the sixth graders, the middle school students, the Lincoln Prep middle school students over to Lincoln Middle, the actual building, and to where it became Lincoln Prep Middle.
Okay.
We were all friends. We recognized that we were different. This group, this was the jocks over here, and these were the pretty cheerleaders over here. These were the art people over here. However, we were all friends. One thing that Lincoln did was teach us to accept people for who they were. Sure, we did teenager type stuff. There was picking on people, but nothing, no real animosity. So we embraced the culture of the school. I don't know that was true in all the high schools, but specifically at Lincoln, we were fine. There were hardly ever any fights or disagreements, or I don't remember any instances of bullying or anything like that. It definitely prepared you for college and being able to go to school with a diverse population and functioning. So I would say student attitudes were favorable. I don't know that I necessarily contributed to school integration at all, other than I was accepting of my classmates. I didn't go out of my way to make people feel unwelcomed or they didn't belong. If you went to Lincoln, you went to Lincoln. If we were classmates, we were classmates. I think the efforts to integrate the schools affected me favorably. Again, I'm not sitting in a classroom with all students that look like me. We all have the same experiences. By the time I graduated, I was in classrooms with diverse populations, diverse experiences, diverse outlooks on different things. And so I think it added to the conversations that were taking place in the classroom, which I think has helped me tremendously as an adult, because I can respect where you've come from, because I had those years of practice in high school. I think it helped me in college. It helped me even beyond that. The academic outcomes, as I understand it, was to improve student achievement across the board. Was kind of the reason why they went with the magnet things. It was to bring students, a diverse population, back to the district, but to improve student achievement across the board. Specifically at Lincoln, the expectation was you were going to pass or you was going to die trying. Um, that was it. The expectation was you were going to pass. I mean, at the time we were demitting students if your GPA fell below a certain level, and you never wanted to be that student. GPAs, class rank was very big at Lincoln. I mean, I had classmates that probably checked their class rank at least once a week. I was not that student. What was important to me was staying above a 3.0 and trying to stay out of as much trouble as I possibly could. But there was definitely that feeling of you're going to be successful.
So what do you recall about other high schools or other district schools, period, in terms of academic outcomes?
I don't recall much about the academic outcomes. The one thing that is very vivid is Central was the classical Greek magnet, which basically meant to us athletics. So they poured a lot of resources into athletics, which is why they had the bigger teams and the quote unquote better athletes. Although we won our fair share of games against them, we competed very well. But that just was the focus. So we thought. Never mind that it was also computers unlimited, because the classical Greek side or the athletics is what got all of the press.
It was computers unlimited.
Right. Yes, it was computers unlimited. However, us being an academic primarily school, when we began to do well in athletics and win some of those championships from Central, it was an added bonus for us. Not only do we have the GPA, we have the athletes as well. Central is probably the only one I really remember. I had some friends that attended the other schools. We didn't really talk much about the academics. I knew that Northeast, if you were interested in military law, I mean, that's where you went. So naturally, their ROTC program was phenomenal. They hosted all of the youth court programs or activities or whatnot. But at Lincoln, the expectation was you were going to pass. And the teachers there were going to work you and work you and work you. I learned how to write term papers at Lincoln. I had an English teacher, Miss Slosman, would have us write these 10, 15-page papers. She would give us 2 personal pronouns. You can use 2 personal pronouns for this entire paper. So talking about really learning how to use your words, so you can't say I. You have to find creative ways to start sentences. I mean, Lincoln really prepared us, and I mean, but that was the expectation. The social outcomes were, again, learning to operate in diverse settings. I guess for the minority student, everything was not going to be about hip hop. All of our assemblies were not going to be about hip hop. We had Black history assemblies, but we also had Mexican history assemblies. I don't necessarily remember white history assemblies, but we had different programs and assemblies that addressed different cultures within the school. And I think that just made us as students more tolerable of the diverse population that was within the building, and then those that we would encounter outside. I think school integration would have shaped the community had they had stuck with it. I think eventually it probably would have made our communities more diverse. If we were still running the magnet programs, I think that people would have come back to the urban core, if you will, because of the options and opportunities that our magnet schools had. I don't think it had a large enough effect because obviously that has not happened. I think it's starting to change now, but we're talking 20 years later.
And what are some of those changes you think?
Some of the changes, well, for me personally, when I came back from undergrad, I knew that I wanted to live in the city. I did not want to live in the suburbs. My wife was against it, but I won out. So we live in the city by choice. I have noticed that some of my neighbors have started to change. Um, I've noticed that there's a lot of development around the 18th and Vine, that kind of that area. More housing is going up, newer housing. The whole 18th and Vine revitalization taking place, and they're going to put more money into that. Um, I definitely think the community slowly, but surely is starting to become more integrated, and not just from white America, but I mean, there's more Hispanics that are even moving into the area as well. Um, so I think our communities are finally starting to integrate a little bit more. I think had the magnet school program stayed in place, and they continue to have worked it over the years, it may have happened a little sooner, I think. The changes that are needed to improve outcomes for students is we have to truly become student centered. Um, I think that saying it is not good enough, our actions have to match it. And now that my son is now in the district, when I talk to his teachers or I talk to the administrators at his school, I listen to what they say, but I'm very much watching what it is that they do. Don't tell me we want the students to achieve, but then your actions says something different. I need you to, I know that they can't focus on my one student, but you can put things into place that truly are centered around today's student, provide the resources that are necessary and the opportunities for them to learn and to grow. We cannot continue to do what was done even 20 years ago when I was in school. Students have changed. So we are beyond the point where sit down, take out your books and your pencils.
And what do you think those changes are that we're not meeting?
Well, the one thing is I know a lot of schools are implementing one-to-one technology. That's good. However, are we training teachers on how to effectively use one-to-one technology? Or are we just handing a computer to a student and saying, here you go, here's all your books? Are we teaching them how to effectively get out there and look for research? Are we teaching them how to use that computer as a true tool or device towards higher learning? Or are we just teaching them how to play around on it and click here and click there? I think that's one thing. Discipline, are we just looking to put kids out of school, or are we looking to change students' minds? Well, why did you do what you did? Well, explain to me your thought process. Well, what are some other options or alternatives to what you decided to do? Well, let's try this. Come back and talk to me in a week. Having those types of conversations instead of being so hard and rigid. Because a lot of students aren't learning at home what you and I learned at home. A lot of times students aren't learning basic life's rules until they get to school. And we have to recognize that and account for that. A lot of our students aren't receiving, my friend says middle class courtesies, but they aren't getting that training at home. And so as a school and as educators, our role is to help our students reach their full potential. So that means we have to account for that as well. So we have to truly become student centered. We have to, and our actions have to match. We have to recognize that our students have changed, and then we must do something to go along with those changes. I'm not saying cater. I'm not saying lower expectations. What I'm saying is remove barriers and help our students to be successful. The only thing I can think of that I would share, and when I look back on my experience at Pinkerton, probably more so at Lincoln, I enjoyed school. I mean, I had a ball. I truly feel that Lincoln prepared me. I felt like Lincoln was really kind of a college before college. And I don't know if it's necessarily because it was diverse by the time I graduated. I don't know if it was the teachers, but I'm sure all of it played a part in it. I don't know that if it had remained the way it was my sixth grade year all the way through, I don't know that I would have had the experiences. Because in the sixth grade, pretty much everybody looked like me. Whereas by the time I graduated, it was a little more diverse.